The Courtship of Harry Potter by Diana Williams. Chapter 8. Communications. Harry sat nervously poking at the food on his plate. It had been 3 weeks since he'd received the cards, 2 weeks since he'd replied, and according to Seamus, it was time for his prospective suitors to make their next move. Seamus had been vague on specifics, but the book had said that the traditional next step was a declaration that the suitor intended to continue their pursuit and a request for a private meeting in the presence of a chaperone. The idea of an intimate meeting with the two older men made Harry's stomach do funny things, and he didn't know whether to hope that both men had changed their minds or hope that they didn't. Draco Malfoy had been receiving owls ever since dinner started, and each time a new one arrived, he aimed his smug look in Harry's direction. The excited exclamations from the Slytherin table and the expectant looks along his own table killed what little appetite Harry might have had. By the time dessert appeared on the table, Harry was so edgy that every movement at the head table made him jump. "Look at that one," Dean said, gesturing towards an owl that had just entered the hall, bearing an enormous bouquet of flowers in his beak. He snickered. "Wonder is that Malfoy?" "Don't think they're for Malfoy," Seamus said, watching as the owl headed in their direction. "I think they're for Harry." "That's against the rules," Hermione said, frowning. "No gifts until after the second offer and the private meeting." The owl landed on the table in front of Harry and laid the bouquet on his plate. "Thanks," Harry said, giving the owl a few tidbits off his plate. He picked up the flowers and looked for a note or a card. "There's nothing saying who they're from." "Well, they're definitely not from Snape," Harry said dryly. Harry set the flowers back down. There was a sudden pop that made them all jump, a puff of bright red smoke, and then an envelope sat in place of the bouquet with a single red rose lying across it. Harry flushed as all of the girls at the table sighed dreamily with a romantic gesture, and reluctantly he opened the envelope. There was a single piece of paper inside, and he pulled it out. "Harry, I received your missive with delight and humble gratitude. Your statement that you had not expected to receive such attentions made me smile. Dare I say that your modesty does you great credit. However, too much modesty can be as great a failing as too much pride, and I look forward to the day when I might be allowed to help you take your place in the wizarding world as one of its shining lights. Forgive my forwardness if I presume too much. Your sweet shyness made me bold. Would you do me the great honor of taking private conference with me Saturday afternoon? Professor McGonagall has graciously loaned us the use of her office for the occasion. Lest you worry that propriety be overcome, I hasten to assure you that Professor McGonagall will be on hand to chaperone the meeting. I wait in hourly anticipation of your reply. Your devoted servant, Maximilian Spinley-Worm." Harry felt slightly nauseous, a feeling that wasn't helped by Dean and Seamus smirking at him across the table. He could feel Hermione lean closer and heard her softly ask if he was all right, and he managed to nod. Somehow he had clung to the thought that the whole thing was some elaborate joke, a prank perpetrated by Malfoy and abetted, however unlikely, by his friends. However, the letter was all too real. Professor Spinley-Worm really was, as impossible as it might seem, lusting over him, and his own head of house obviously expected him to follow through with these traditions. And Professor Snape, was he lusting over Harry as well, or had his part in this whole thing been merely another attempt to humiliate Harry? After all, the professor had yet to send him a second offer, something he was certain Malfoy would all too gleefully point out. Involuntarily, his eyes went to the head table, and to his surprise, he found that Snape was watching him intently. The potions master looked away immediately, turning his attention to a house elf standing beside him for a moment before the house elf disappeared, and reappeared next to Harry, holding out an envelope. "Professor Snape asks Zippy to give this to Harry Potter, sir." Harry swallowed hard and took the envelope with shaking hands. "Thank you, Zippy." The house elf smiled delightedly at him. "Harry Potter is welcome, sir." He disappeared, and Harry slowly opened the envelope. There was a piece of paper inside, and something else. Something a little thicker and rectangular in shape. Although he was dying to know what it was, he pulled out the paper first and spread it open. "Mr. Potter, I am relieved to discover that 7 years in this institution has instilled something in you, even if it is the art of diplomacy. Either that or your skills in dissembling have improved considerably. I doubt that there are many in the wizarding world, and certainly none among your peers, who would agree that I honor you in any way through my consideration. I suspect that unless you are considerably denser than I thought, you have wondered if this is some elaborate prank. It is not, for I despise pranks and would not willingly participate in one. Neither is it an attempt to humiliate you for my own enjoyment. Your performance in my class offers me ample opportunity for that. I am sincere in my desire to assist you in finding your place in the wizarding world, and to protect you from those who would use you for their own purposes. If you have difficulty reconciling that with what you know of me, please direct your attention to the enclosed item. I believe it will explain my motivations to your satisfaction. As is customary in this situation, I have arranged for us to meet in the headmaster's office Sunday, 8 p.m. Do not be late, as the headmaster and I have quite enough to do without waiting around for you. The password is Treacle Thoughts. Respectfully, Severus Snape. Harry couldn't help but amused snort. It was so like Snape to insult him liberally while at the same time pursuing him. He pulled out the enclosed item, took one look at it, and gasped so loudly that everyone at his end of the table turned to stare. "All right," Ron asked, concerned. "All right then." In reply, Harry jumped up and ran out of the hall, Snape's letter clutched in his hand, and quite unaware that he had left Professor Spindlingworm's letter sitting on the table. A surprised silence fell over the room, and then excited chatter filled the air. At the head table, Max gave Snape a smug, triumphant look, and McGonagall leaned over to murmur, "I'm so sorry, Severus. Harry didn't appear to like whatever it is you said." Snape allowed a slight smile to touch his lips and shrugged slowly. "It doesn't matter, Minerva. I shall persevere." At the Gryffindor table, Ron and Hermione exchanged a look. "I'll better go after him," Ron said, getting up. "I'll go with you," Hermione said, picking up the other letter, and rose. "Harry forgot these." They slipped out of the hall and made their way up to the Gryffindor dormitory, where they found Harry sitting on his bed, staring intently at something. Tear tracks streaked his face, but when they entered, he managed to smile and rubbed them away with his sleeve. "Are you all right?" Hermione asked, sitting down on the end of the bed. "What the bloody hell did that bastard say to you?" Ron demanded. In reply, Harry handed him a rectangular card. Ron stared at it in surprise. It was a wizarding postcard, a picture of some kind of ancient ruin on it. As he watched, the picture panned so he could see a grassy hillside, then bright blue water, and finally the laughing face of a young woman with long red hair. He flipped it over and read the writing on the back, then handed it to Hermione. She glanced at the picture, turned it over, and read aloud. "Sev, you were right. Corfu is amazing. The ocean is so blue and so clear that you can see the bottom, and I actually swam with dolphins yesterday. Can you imagine? And these ruins, I could feel the power in them still, and it makes me feel so incredibly humble. Don't laugh. It can happen. I imagine you are huddled over your books and cauldrons, hardly even noticing that it is summer. Next year, I will drag you with us no matter how much you protest. Mother says we will visit Egypt, just to tempt you further, and I absolutely refuse to consider it without you, my dearest friend. Lily." "That's your mum, isn't it, Harry?" Ron asked, sitting down on the bed and gesturing to the card. Harry nodded. "So they were friends then?" "Weird." "You're telling me," Harry said fervently. "It does explain why he's always looked out for you in a way," Hermione said slowly. "We thought it was because Dumbledore wanted him to, or because your father saved his life, but maybe it's because he loved your mother." Ron made a face. "Oh! Wanted to shag Harry because he and Harry's mum were friends. That's just wrong in so many ways." Hermione gave Ron an exasperated look. "Ron, I didn't mean that kind of love. Even Snape's not that twisted." "Want a bet?" Ron muttered. "Did he say anything about your mother in his letter?" Hermione asked Harry. He handed her Snape's letter. Just that the card would explain his motivations. Hermione scanned the letter, snickering as part of it, then handed it to Ron. "Not exactly a romantic declaration, is it?" "The book says they're not allowed to make any romantic overtures until after the first date," Harry pointed out. "Although Professor Max's letter comes close." "Oh, hell! he said, remembering his flight from the hall. I left it on the table. Hermione held up the letter and the rose. I brought them up for you. Shall I put the rose in water? Harry flushed and rolled his eyes. Right, I'm a guy, in case you hadn't noticed. Next, you'll be suggesting I press it in a book as a keepsake. Ron, who had plucked the DADA professor's letter out of Hermione's hand to read, tossed it back at Harry. I don't know, Harry. As one of the shining lights of the wizarding world, you might want to have it bronzed or something. Could put it in a museum someday. Wait, your shy sweetness wouldn't allow that, would it? Harry grabbed his pillow and whacked Ron over the head. Professor Snape. Snape looked up from the essays he was grading and scowled. Potter, I don't recall requesting that you remain after class, your poor performance notwithstanding. You didn't, sir. I needed to talk to you. Snape sat back in his chair and frowned. I assume that you are aware that this is expressly against the rules. Harry took a couple steps forward, grinning. Well, you know me and rules. Snape snorted at that and crossed his arms. Very well. Say whatever it is you have to say and get out. Harry cleared his throat, flushing a little, and took a step closer. It's about that card. The one in the letter. I just wanted to tell you. Giving up on words, he leaned closer and quickly kissed Snape's cheek. Thanks. He beat a hasty retreat towards the door. Potter! Harry stopped at the doorway, swallowed hard, and looked back at Snape. The tone of voice had been sharp, and the frown on Snape's face was terrifying. But there was something peculiar in his eyes. Something almost soft. Sir? You're welcome. Now get out. Harry grinned, relieved. Yes, sir! He hurried out the door, then stuck his head back in. Sunday night, 8 sharp, the headmaster's office. I'll be there, sir. Snape sat at his desk for a long moment after Harry had left, staring at the empty doorway, then slowly reached up and touched his cheek. Albus, he murmured, what in bloody hell have you started?